What I'm going to do now is talk to you a little bit about the gear that I use for my type of shooting, which is run and gun cinematic shooting on the Sony a7S III. So the info that I give you here is going to be very specific to my style. It won't work for everybody, but hopefully you'll be able to get some ideas for what you might want to put in your kit. So first of all, this is my backpack. This is a Shimoda Action X30 backpack. It's waterproof, it's got this roll top, and inside here I have my camera mounted up on a gimbal. Almost all the shooting that I do is on a gimbal because it allows me to replace a lot of other kinds of camera stabilizers, such as a tripod or a slider or a dolly. A gimbal allows me to move fluidly and improvise my shots in a way that you really just can't do with bulkier pieces of gear. So it's just super versatile and it lets me be creative on the fly. That's how I like to shoot. My camera of choice is the Sony a7S III because it's light, compact, and it allows me to shoot really high quality cinematic footage without having to carry a huge bulky camera with me. Again, everything that I shoot fits in this backpack. That's what's most important for me. So the a7S III fits the bill. It also has great autofocus, which I've mentioned in my other sections here in the workshop. The autofocus allows me to put it on the gimbal and not have to worry about keeping my subject properly focused. With a lot of the other cinema cameras that you might consider, they won't have good autofocus, or they may not have autofocus at all, which means that you need a separate person to pull your focus for you if you're trying to do any sort of tracking shot that requires a shift of focus. Let's talk about lenses. In terms of prime versus zoom, I prefer to shoot on primes because they give me a wider aperture in a smaller lens. For instance, this is the Sony 24mm f1.4 lens, and this lens gives me a much wider aperture than I could ever get in any zoom. This is a full frame f1.4 at 24mm. In my backpack, I have 6 other small primes, so I'm going to break it down in terms of which lenses I think are the most important and how I would use them. So, the main lens, the number one lens, if you have only one lens, I would say is the 35mm f1.8, because with this lens I can shoot on a gimbal. It's just a really easy focal length to work with. I can use it for medium close-up portraits. I wouldn't recommend going into tight close-ups with this, but medium portraits, that's fine too. I can also use it for YouTube selfie shooting. This is okay in a small room if I want to get a medium shot of myself. It's not too tight and it's not too wide. It feels natural for that. And it has that linear drive autofocus motor, which means that I can use it as an autofocus lens, or I can switch over to manual and have a very natural feeling control over the lens in manual focus too. The second lens I would recommend adding to your kit is this 85mm f1.8 because we all film people and we want to make people look good. And the 85 is a flattering portrait lens. Lots of bokeh, great for close-ups. Next, I would recommend adding a wide-angle lens to your kit. So you could either go for something like the 24 f1.4 GM, which is an expensive premium option if you really want a wide aperture at a wider focal length, or you can go for something cheaper and smaller like the 18mm f2.8. The 18 would be in the ultra-wide category though, so this will give you a much more distorted view of the world than the 24 will. The 24 will still look overall pretty normal. The 18 will start to look stretched out. And then as you add on to your kit, you might want to consider the trio of primes that Sony has just released. This is the 24mm f2.8, 40mm f2.5, and the 50mm f2.5. These are all exactly the same size lens, which means if you use them on a gimbal, you can quickly change them out without having to rebalance your gimbal at all. The main drawback to these 3 lenses is that they don't have the widest apertures. So you may be asking yourself, why should I use those 3 primes instead of just getting an f2.8 zoom like a 24-70? And the answer to that for me is just size and weight. I'm trying to keep this gimbal as lightweight as possible because I do a lot of crazy gimbal moves. I do moves where I'm holding it up high, I do moves where I'm running with the gimbal down low, I put it at the end of a monopod, and every little bit of weight that I add to that gimbal makes it harder to use, makes me more tired when I'm using it. So small size and weight is the most important thing to me. But if your priorities are different, if you are okay with a bigger, heavier lens on your camera, maybe you don't use a gimbal as much, or maybe you just don't hold the gimbal for as long, or you don't do those crazy kinds of moves, then maybe a zoom would make more sense for you. I want to give you one more tip here about my lens kit. I adapted all my lenses up to 77mm because that's the largest filter thread size of the largest lens, and I have a magnetic adapter on here, so I can use magnetic filters instead of the traditional screw-on kind. That means that I can just take my magnetic filter, drop it on the lens, and then I'm ready to shoot. So I have a variable ND here that's magnetic, and if I need to switch that from one lens to the next, then it takes a matter of seconds. Magnetic filters plus magnetic threaded adapter will make your lens changes a lot faster. The drawback there is that this falls off more easily than a threaded filter would. Okay, so that's an overview of my gear. Hope you found it useful.